everyone. Sorry, we'll start the recording. Yeah, so as you see in the room here, we have a mix of group here. Thanks for the strong Otis interest in this week's topic. And then we also have about 30 people joining online in this hybrid format. So thanks everyone for joining. We are the Society of American Military Engineers, Rhein-Main Post. I'm Scott Kerrigan, I'm the current Post President. And right now we're going to present our Post updates for about 15 minutes and then get into our technical program for the week on structural proofing designs in Germany. So next slide, please. So for those online, this is the normal housekeeping notes that we are recording. Please keep your microphones muted. We're recording these. This will be posted on YouTube afterwards for people to reference if they missed it or to reference in the future, since a lot of these topics are current, and as people come in and out of theater, they can catch up on these Germany-specific topics. So you can access that from our website, which is at the bottom. Next slide, please. A reminder of the different leadership positions here. So if you would like to get in touch with any specific person or purpose, these are your points of contact. I want to give those just a special thanks to the board, especially Brian Osborne and Tim, and Brian as well. I've been TDY in a way the last couple meetings, but everyone's been carrying these meetings strong. We had a great IGE event last month. So thank you for the post running. So next slide, please. Okay, so I'll now turn over to Tim to talk about programs.
Thanks, Scott. So this year's program was largely developed in combination and collaboration with our U.S. government counterparts to hear what topics are interesting for them and what is interesting for industry. And that's how we ended up with today's topic on structural proofing in Germany. Next month, a lot of us will be at the SAME JETSI conference in San Antonio. In June, we have the golf tournament coming up. In July, it'll be interesting. We're going to look at what the market looks like in the construction industry. I was just talking with Achim about the ATFP that we're planning to do in August, and then a STEM TED Talk in September. And then the next slide shows the rest of the year. In October, we're going to speak about our centers of excellence. That's the SAME groups, cyber resiliency, and of course, our normal holiday special in December. Scott, back to you.
Thanks, Tim. So I also would like to take this after going through our program for the year to make a nice announcement. We were recently notified that we won the SAME national level award for the industry government engagement events.
Wow.
So we actually won this last year as well, and from all of the posts, so it's quite a surprise that we won this again, but it just really reflects on the great programs that we put together and the value that our members and national have seen in that. So yeah, thank you for the speakers that come, that bring these relevant topics, Tim for organizing and the board that together. So thanks for everyone's engagement. Our contributions are being recognized and valued. Next slide, please. All right, so Chris, I believe you're online.
Yes, I am. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending which time zone you are in. Thank you, Scott. The update is just very quick. We have 10 new members that joined the post since January. Actually, 2 more, in particular in late February. We don't have any additional members so far in March or April. And as far as the next slide, please. As far as the sustaining companies and membership, we have 26 sustaining members that renewed for 2023, and we thank you for that. And there are 3 they're still in their grace period, and so we invite those in the grace period to renew. And that's all I have for now. Over.
All right, thanks, Chris.
You're welcome.
Next slide, please. All right, Nick.
You guys are okay. It'll be as long for me to get up there and back as it will be just to talk. So
You just need to get closer to the microphone. Sorry about that. You can come here.
I'll do it quickly. I'm not going to read everything on the slide. There's some stuff on there. Hopefully you guys will be able to use the links if you want to get to it. The couple of important things are we still don't have dates yet for the SAME LDP program, but it will come out sometime late summer, early fall for signing up for that. It's a really, really great program. If you're thinking about it and you want to talk to somebody about it, reach out to me, or I think Brian, you've done it. So there are people here that can tell you all about it. A couple other things up there, and then the last thing on there that I want to talk about is the Young Professionals event that we're trying to put on at the golf course the week before for a couple of reasons. So that's a different date than I had up here last time. So just 25 May is the date for it. It's the Thursday because Friday is a holiday, and then the week after we'll have the golf event. So it's gonna be a Young Professional sponsored thing, but I'm not gonna try to make it only Young Professionals in any way, shape, or form. Everybody come on out.
All right, thanks, Nick. See you on screen.
Yeah.
And so, Britta, I don't believe you're online, but please say if so.
I am.
Okay. Well, thanks for being there. Yeah. So, hi, Britta. Welcome. And
Hi.
yeah, please update us on STEM.
Okay. Have you already switched to my slide?
Yeah, we do have.
Okay.
We do now.
Okay.
Thanks.
There we go. Delay on my end. All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. Had a little bit of a conflict, but I'm happy to be here to give you a quick update on these STEM scholarship applications. As we previously stated, we did quite a bit of outreach this time around, reaching out to guidance counselors and instructors at Wiesbaden High School and Frankfurt International School initially. And then as we were heading close to the deadline for submittal, we really didn't have any responses. So we also reached out to Stuttgart High School to give them the opportunity to submit as well. We also went through social media. We had some of our memberships or friends of members who were able to reach out to the Parent Teacher Association and some other Facebook groups that they were aware of. So I think we did a pretty good job of getting the word out, but unfortunately we only received 3 applications. They're being reviewed. All 3 of them are excellent candidates. Just trying to follow up, playing phone tag and email tag with their references. That's the last step that we have to do before the board can make the final decision, and we can notify the scholarship winners in May. And of course, those will be awarded at the golf tournament as previously stated. And also wanted to make note that we are supporting 3 STEM camp students this summer, so we're very excited about that. We've provided funds in the past and are doing that again this year with an additional sponsorship, so 3 total instead of 2 in the past. And I've mentioned this before, and I like keeping this link on because it's really fun to follow. The robotics competition, Wiesbaden High School is a member, as is, I believe, Stuttgart High School, but it's the 2023 first robotics competition, and I've identified the team numbers for Wiesbaden High School. So if you get a chance, you have a coffee break, lunch break, and you want to look at something fun, this is a great link to look at and to see how the competition is playing out with these student groups from around the world. And then the last thing I wanted to just put out there for everybody in the room and joining us virtually, if you have any ideas, especially if you have kids going to the high schools or, recently graduated, if there are any other ideas for how we can do a better job next year to encourage more applications, I would really appreciate your recommendations. And that's my email address on the bottom. It now works, I think. If not, Cardno, I think still works. So that's all I have. Are any questions?
Thanks, Britta, for the update, but also for all your work the last few months, getting the word out and getting those scholarships and support to the STEM camps and the college students. I will ask Brian, the treasurer, to give us an update on how much funding we can expect to award to each.
Yes. Hey, everybody, I'm Brian Weibrecht. I'm the post treasurer. And so I just want to follow up with what Nick and Britta said. So we have the scholarships available. And so the way that we fund these are through the golf tournament. And that's So bring your friends and let's get as much participation as we can. That's the most exciting part about this. We get to give back. I think of, high school Brian, receiving, just a $500 scholarship turned me to a civil engineer. So that's the most rewarding part about this. So right now we have budgeted approximately about $3,000 to give in scholarship funds, and then we're also able to support these other students for the STEM camp. So just think about that, as we have the golf tournament in the next couple months, and bring your friends out. Let's get as much participation as possible. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Brad. Next slide, please. I don't believe Chandler's on.
I didn't see.
Yeah, he's in a much different time zone now. But let's see what he's informing us now. Yeah, just keep us reminded about the website where all of our information is, our YouTube channel, and how a lot of our information gets out from the newsflash if you are a member. Otherwise, you can manually find our information on our website always. Next slide, please. And lastly, the golf event. Yeah, 2 June. So if you haven't already, please mark your calendar. This is our big scholarship fundraiser for the year. So next slide, please. So, Colonel Hazlitt, if you'd like to make your way up to the front. So I would just like to use today's opportunity. One of our guest speakers, we have a professional relationship as well. And since he's on site, and so is the leadership of the USARAF G34 office, we'd like to take advantage of this opportunity. So I'm going to introduce Colonel Hazlitt. She's the U.S. Army in Europe and Africa Provost Marshal and the G34 Protection Chief. And then we have yeah.
Here, come on here.
Akam Knakstead, the Chief of.
We can get out of the light. Yeah. There you go.
This
is the keeps following it. It's so short though, so I can get entertained.
So
Okay.
I'll step
Perfect.
out of the way.
Okay.
That's great.
There we go. Okay, I gotta face this way.
Yes.
To everyone out there, because I counted 20 people online and 13, 14 personnel in the room, so got a pretty good turnout for this event. But thank you for your time. Thank you for allowing me to take this opportunity. And for those who don't know why I'm standing here, is because anti-terrorism and force protection fall in the protect lane here at United States Army Europe and Africa. And we have a tough job that the team does of integrating our protection requirements into construction and into new build. And so today I get to recognize a critical member of our team, or who provides support to our team, Mr. Ogden here. Connection. I did practice. I get to recognize him for his help, because you guys know more than I do. But what I learned was that I can join the engineer corps here, supporting United States Army Europe and Africa, or Europe as a whole, and U.S. construction in the Corps of Engineers, because of our diversity of our projects. We run some pretty large projects in Europe, and he joined in 2000. And boy, did we serve him up some diversity in large projects, because in 2001, tragically, after the events that happened, with the Twin Towers, we had to change some policies, immediately making some structural changes with something as simple as our windows, to going into our plans that we're building to meet the new anti-terrorism requirements that the Army and Department of Defense had given to us. And Mr. Ockham, he shouldered that mission. And he's been a key person in integrating our anti-terrorism requirements that aren't necessarily so pretty with your engineer requirements, and meshing us into one. Not just doing that with what we have and with the plans that are out there, but he also sources host nation solutions to this. So we get a little more German American vibe there by finding solutions here locally, instead of having to reach back to the United States. This is a difficult job. Scott and the AT team here, they work tirelessly to get this integrated. And it's because of you that we're leading the way, sir, on the protection of our soldiers, our families, our mission, people, place, things. And now we're going to be adding cybersecurity there too. Yes, systems, So I really want to thank you. And on behalf, sorry, Richard, did you?
I think you represent your organization and your association very well, sir.
Absolutely.
I can sleep better at night because of you, people like you.
And our families can, our families can rest during the day knowing that their children and their service members are protected even better in their work. So on behalf of the protection team and the anti-terrorism team, I'd like to present you with the United States Army Europe and Africa G34 Protect coin and say thank you for your support and your hard work for over 23 years. Thank you. So it's a paperweight. Or you can also, like that, right there.
Get a picture of that or something.
Strong and serious relationship, and it's good partnership.
Great, awesome. Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Great stuff. All right, so this was our last slide. We'll now transition from the post announcements to the technical briefing. So, and then I will excuse our G34 leadership. Yeah. But thank you also.
They said there'd be no masks.
So thank you also, Major Ray, and also the Chief of AT, Mr. Balzac, for also spending your time to recognize Akim today.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, team.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And if you are eligible to join the VFW, we'd love to have you at our host and association meetings.
Thank you.
Bye. All right, so I'll hand it over to.
Thanks, Scott. So as I said, we've developed our program this year really based on input from the government and from industry. Structural proofing is a topic that I came across when I first started doing architecture and engineering projects probably 17 years ago. And for some reason, the topic always came up, and it was always reinventing the wheel a number of times. And now with the added complexity of projects going from indirect to direct, meaning from 35% to 100% design, there's even more complexity in that. So I'm really delighted today that we have an opportunity to have this panel discussion on structural proofing in Germany. We have a panel of experts here. Akim, as you already heard, we have Thomas Crow from AECOM and Brian Goldbach also from AECOM. So we have a nice balance of government and industry participants to talk about this topic and to introduce it and get it kicked off. Brian, over to you.
Thank you, Tim. And thank you for having us on this panel. Just to clarify, I'm definitely not an expert on structural proofing. I just am engaged in it in the course of doing work with the U.S. government. And as already noted, we do have two industry experts with us at the table. And to get started, let's just go to the next slide, Michael. And we can skip to the next slide, and we'll just start with a well-being moment instead of a safety moment today. And the topic really that I wanted to present was being on time in your schedules and being prepared, being considerate of each other, whether it's in a meeting like this today or in your deliverables, your design review meetings. Just helps, make the relationships that much more successful and gives us all an opportunity to structure our projects and to have quality and success at the end. So let's go to the next slide. So we'll let Thomas introduce us a little bit into the legal basis of structural engineering, what it means from the industry side. And then I guess the challenge really is at the end of our presentation to see if we're aligned or not between the private industry and the U.S. government, where we have overlaps and opportunities for the future. So, Thomas.
Thank you very much, Brian. First of all, in Germany, we need to understand what the proofing entitles and where it comes from. It's pretty much based on the Second Amendment of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Germany, which pretty much declares that we need to provide safety for every single party or every single person or the public. And that's also includes the structural industry and the structural integrity of buildings based on the 4I principle, which leads to a proofing engineer, which is an independent authority per se. All of the German proofing engineers are pretty much governed by a set of regulations, which has its main core on a Musterbauordnung or a layout for a basis regulation. But each federal state has a different one, but based on this one. So all the articles that you find in the different Landesbauordnungen are pretty much the same, but may have some sort of differences. In Rheinland-Pfalz, it's called Prüfingenieur Baustaatliche Verordnung, or in Bavaria, it's called something very long. But at the end of the day, it's still the same regulations. Pretty much some of these regulations define what the check-in engineer or the proofing engineer is, what the regulations are that govern his activities, his obligations, his services, his fees, etc. But as a whole, although he is bound to the German law, he's independent. He can actually say and decide what to check and what not to check. The services primarily, or pretty much the main activity of the check-in engineer is protect the building and protect the integrity of the people and protect pretty much also himself, but also the engineer that he's checking for. Normally, the activity of a check-in engineer is handed over by the building authorities in a normal public relation. But when it comes down to the USACE, they consider it as pretty much a private contract because of the regulations between governments. Next slide, please.
Can I just add to that?
Of course you can.
So I guess we had a discussion on that based on our meeting yesterday. You consider this private because we want you as an E to contract out to the proofing engineer. But I think from a state building code consideration, this is still bauaufsichtlich. It's not a private proofing because it is required per the state building code. We just ask you to take this contract under your umbrella.
That is correct. When it comes down to why we mention it as a private contract is because the USACE, specifically when it comes down to Rheinland-Pfalz, you have the accelerated version of the permitting, which allows you to choose the proofing engineer, which is not like the authorities do not give you, or they don't tell you which check-in engineer to take. We can actually choose it. We can actually ask for proposals for lump sums that include all the services, and hence that makes it more private.
Okay. I just try to distinguish between private when it comes to, for example, in Spangdahlem, we built family housing, and we would not have to have it proved, but we still do so.
Yeah.
Because we want to add an additional layer of safety, so we get it proved. So that would we consider that private, like privatrechtlich versus bauaufsichtlich.
Well, it also depends on the type of building, correct? So it depends if you have building code 1 or building class 1 and 2 or 3, 4 and 5 need to be checked anyway. But specifically, and I'm specifically using Rheinland-Pfalz because that's where we have most of our projects at the moment. Everything that is Gebäudeklasse 3, which is pretty much the frontier between checking and not checking, we are still checking it, but it's not something that we have to do. It's because it's a requirement from the USAC.
So I guess we can agree that regardless of how we see it from a perspective, calling it private or not private, it's all based on the same regulation and the requirements are still being provided. Correct. Next slide, please. Or
no, we actually covered that here.
Okay.
And this is how are proofing engineering fees established?
Oh no.
Next slide.
Next slide. Sorry, Michael. There you go. Thank you very much. So as I mentioned before, the USAC, we tried to get lump sums for all the services from the check-in engineer for them to cover structural calculations, structural drawings, and also construction services. But they do tend to do this lump sum based on the structural fee system that they have in Germany. Although they consider themselves private, or we can argue about that as well, but they still base their fees on tables, factors that are actually given by the German state. And they, again, because we are in a federative state, they differ from state to state. But if, again, example of Rheinland-Pfalz, if you go to 2 different check-in engineers to get 2 different offers, they shouldn't vary too much. So maybe one check-in engineer will charge you 150 euros per hour and the other one will charge you 148.50. But it's probably the same thing. When it comes down to amendments to the structural calculation, specifically by delivering intermediate design or final design, one can get changes from the architectural point of view, and we in structures have to make those changes happen, and we need to report to the check-in engineer that this is going to happen. These additional Nachträge can be added to the lump sum because they're not in the scope. But sometimes it's just a small correction which they do not include in the additional fee, but it might cause additional costs. Right? No? No. When it comes down to, for example, if the USAC contracts us to do construction phase services, we need to be aware that automatically by assigning the check-in engineer, he is obliged by law to do the on-site check-in. He's not obliged to go every single time or every single pouring for every single structural element, but he is obliged to do a couple of them, and he's actually allowed to choose which elements he does. On the other hand, if the USAC contracts a company or contracts us, for example, we actually have to go out and we have to approve it, produce protocols, hand them over to the client, hand them over to the construction firm for them to be allowed to be poured. The same thing happens if, let's say, AECOM and the check-in engineer go to site. The construction firm before pouring needs to have the approval of both parties. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, all the responsibilities, activities, jurisdictions, etc., are all based in the Landbauordnung, and you can actually check them all there. All the certifications, how the check-in engineer has been chosen to be a check-in engineer, etc., and they're all regulated. So pretty much, I could talk hours about this, to be honest, and you probably would all fall asleep, but the most important part is that everything that the check-in engineer does is regulated and can be traced down. Next slide, please. If we go for a normal service, let's say that we go privately to the check-in engineer acts according to the HOI, which is the Honorarordnung für Architekten und Ingenieure, and they check pretty much the permitting stage, not the concept design, not the initial design. They pretty much check the full structural calculation. That's for the permitting process. Once the permitting process has been completed and the structural calculation has been approved, we move on, or he moves on, to what we call Leistungsphase 5, which is the execution drawings or execution stage of the project. And he starts checking the reinforcement drawings, construction drawings, steel drawings, timber drawings, whatever the structure is needed. And once we have the final approval for, let's say, the foundation or the roof, he will issue in the process of checking, he will issue different types of documentations called Prüfberichte or reports that he will hand over, but I'll talk about this in the next slide. So any questions up to here?
No questions. I might want to
Sure.
comment on that, mainly from the US colleague perspective, because I find when we have new colleagues that they see this principle of structure proofing, it's very surprising to people, like how detailed this proofing is. Just for clarification, so when we do technical review from the court, we don't go into that level of detail. We check like general feasibility, is it complete, does it make sense, is it coordinated? Proofing engineer, technically, he checks like every single number.
He does.
That's what people need to understand. He goes like page by page by page, and he checks off with a little green checkbox, like every number, every load assumption, every rebar, like everything is like really checking every line. Or they use like independent software to check it, and they say they checked it independently with different means. So it's a very detailed, extensive review.
Right. Thank you very much. What we're presenting here is an example of a Prüfbericht, which is kind of like it can be an initial Prüfbericht, which will help you or will help the client to get an additional permit to start earth movements or earth excavations, but it also states different, it also gives you different information. Like, for example, if the structural calculation wasn't complete, he will probably tell you, you need to hand over more detailed calculations, or you need to correct this, or you need to hand over the geotechnical report, or different types of documentations that are to be followed. So that for us, the first Prüfbericht and the following Prüfberichte are more kind of like a guideline to help the check-in engineer for them to approve us or to approve our design. And basically, at the last paragraph that we have here on the bottom right corner, pretty much states the level of checking, or the level of, let's say, termination of the project, which might be the structural calculation has been checked, has been approved, but we still need to check the structural drawings or the execution drawings. That might be some sort of misunderstanding, because that means that, yes, the structural calculation has been approved, but the execution drawings have not. That doesn't mean that the structural calculation is wrong or in any kind of way incorrect. It just means that the proofing process will still continue until he actually checks and approves the last pouring. Next slide, please. I've added this as a little bit of a guideline how what Achim mentioned, the Grüneinträge are. This is from a private project that I did a couple years ago, pretty much where he just marks every single bar. He goes through every single rebar that you draw on a two-dimensional drawing. He actually analyzes, makes comments, suggestions, which are not kind of like suggestions per se, but, and legally, we're not, how can I put it?
Obligated.
We're not obligated, thank you. We're not obligated to put them into our drawings, but actually these drawings with the green marks can actually go to the construction site and can be executed. It is customary though in Germany, and it's actually common sense to do it, because if not, you're become a little bit of a, you as an engineer become liable for it. We tend to take over all these green marks or green comments. So for us, and to change the drawing to make a new review, send it out to the construction site for clarification that we acknowledged the comments, we corrected them, and we sent them out with the approval of the check-in engineer.
And this is also what we expect, like for 100%. Sometimes we ask, do you want to have the official green stamp drawings? We don't want to see that in our office. What we want to see with 100% is have that mark on the drawing where it says we incorporated the proofing engineer's remarks.
Correct.
And this document is the same, similar to the proofed and checked document.
With the date of the approval of the check-in. Yeah, that's exactly what we meant with customary. That's how we do it. But one thing that is very important to understand is that we don't send the corrected drawings back to the check-in engineer. So once we got them, once we correct them, we send them out to the construction site for execution. The check-in engineer is not obliged, and he's probably going to charge you more if he wants to back check the comments that we did or that he'd had.
Yeah, so get it right.
So yeah, exactly. Pretty much, yeah. And like I said, they're based on suggestions because it's a shared liability, but you normally tend to do.
Okay. So thank you, Thomas, for that initial introduction into structural proofing engineer, and to kind of build a bridge now over to Achim. Contractually, what does this mean for us as an A&E? It's an integrated process. The reference to that one requirement is a big bigger requirement behind the scenes. It's going to affect your performance, your submittals, getting your 100% done, making sure that the Corps can get projects on the street and tendered as complete and ready to go. So Michael, next slide. Just some examples out of the scope of works that some of you may be familiar with. There's just a line to do something, but there's also information that says that the proofing engineer has to be accepted by the COR, and that raises a legal question, because why would the COR approve someone that's already, as under the German law, been certified to perform a certain service? So those are things you may want to look for in your projects and your contracts when you're negotiating.
Yeah, maybe I can speak. I can speak to that. It's two things. A proofing engineer is licensed, but you have proofing engineers licensed for steel, concrete, timber. We have experience that sometimes we have proofing engineers licensed for concrete, checking steel. So we are not certifying the proofing engineer. We just want to make sure that proofing engineer that's selected has a license for the discipline in our project.
Okay.
The second thing is that the proofing engineer has to travel to the construction site, and we have to pay for that travel, right? So we do not like to have a proofing engineer from Munich doing structural proofing on a project in Spandalen, and then we pay 700 euros for every travel. Mm-hmm. So we want to have, that's why maybe the way it's worded, it might be wrong, but we want to see who it is and say, yeah, we agree with that selection.
Right, because contractually we have to disclose that when we do our proposals. Yeah. But if after the task order is awarded, someone says, no, we don't like this selection, okay, that raises maybe a conflict for us.
I understand, but that's our background. It's not that we say, oh, we don't accept that person. It's more like those two reasons.
Right. Okay, great. Again, going into the construction phase services, sorry about that. Again, there's references to whether you have that service or not. You still may have those structural proofing engineer obligations during the construction period. Something to be aware of in terms of the relationship. If we're not managing a construction site, the contractor needs a service done. Who's notifying whom to get that service provided, whether it's through the COR, through us, and back and forth. So next slide. And again, to close out projects when the project's finished, there are some legal formworks that the structural proofing engineer has to acknowledge or prepare to help the final acceptance of the project before occupancy permit can occur. So with that, again, just some recommendations of when you're doing your proposals. The type of project, the size of project, locations of projects will all have influences on your proposals. So with that, is there any other questions?
I just have a comment on what we just discussed. It would be better to have that discussion prior,
yeah.
You know, like after contract award, to make sure this is a person we are putting on our bid, and we would say, yeah, it's acceptable.
I mean, we at least we present those for our subcontractors in our proposals, and so obviously it's up to the core contracting then to take a look at it,
we
right?
Need to think about.
Okay. So with that, we'll take a leap over to Akim's world from the government perspective and see what he has to say about this.
Yeah, I think we touched a lot on this, but I tried to look at this from our perspective, what our expectations are, what our challenges are. And I don't know, next slide, please. That's just my name. So, well, obviously our expectation, our goal is we want for Germany, we want to meet the permitting requirements, right? And we take advantage of that to get an additional layer of quality assurance during design and construction. And what we decided for ourselves is that, I think you have it on the slides, that outside Germany, we made the decision that we want to have a similar layer of quality QA oversight for projects outside Germany, but only for the design package, not during construction. We just want to get like a proved and checked package as well that we give to the construction contractor. Because outside Germany, we don't have that mandatory proofing engineer. So we try to establish something that is similar or close, which is a challenge, and I think I come back to that later. And we're also, our goal is we want to get like a life cycle, project life cycle independent structure proofing. We want to have it all in one hand. We don't want to have it partially under the A&E, partially under the construction contract. That's our goal. Next slide, please. So what I have here also, like you had, I had some extracts from our, I need to go to the next slide as well. These are extracts from my scope of work, and I also highlighted a few stuff, as you already had, appropriate discipline, important for us, that the proofing engineers have different licenses, so we want to get the right person. Also, we want to have at 100% design a complete set of proofed and stamped structural drawings, and we want to have a set of drawings that is what a typical German contractor would expect, which is a complete set of rebar drawings, so that the contractor just needs to order and build, which is different to how it's done in the States, where the construction contractor would actually prepare the rebar drawings. That's different in Germany, so we want to have a similar process for our projects. The construction contractor gets a...
Akim, I had a question.
Sure.
On the previous slide, you said to have a single structural proofing engineer per contract. The last bullet on the previous slide.
The life cycle.
Life cycle. Same office under the same, task order, right? Is that what you're speaking?
Yeah, so what I was trying to say is, like sometimes, and we get to that later, like if the A&E doesn't get the construction services awarded, you have it under the construction contractor, which is not what
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so there's a scope of work. Yeah, so that's our goal. Get that one package. Next slide, please. Okay. This is still our scope of work for inside Germany. And here it becomes a little tricky. I think the scope of work language.
Yeah, that's
like you never know if the construction phase support service option is awarded. So we try to word it in a way like what happens if. So we want to have everything in one hand, but if that option is not awarded, we still need to have the site supervision and the shop drawings reviewed under the proofing engineer. So in that case, the AE needs to put this into the specification for the construction contractor to award it. And that's where this reference section 4 comes into play. So that's a little tricky from the wording. So
maybe if I can interrupt you for a second. If we have, let's say, I'm going to use an example. We have a complete in situ concrete building, which the contractor, we produce all the reinforcement drawings. We go through the proofing engineer. We hand over according to German market standards with bending schedules, different sizes or different bars showing in the drawing, and the construction firm goes like, I want to use prefab or half prefab. That still needs to go to the check-in engineer.
Yes.
And that still needs to be checked. So you're actually also by taking it just in one hand, or just where like the flexibility needs to stay within the contractor as well, correct?
Yeah, that's true. If the contractor proposes a different solution, it needs to go back to the proofing engineer.
But even if, let's say, we as a designer, because we don't, let's say we produce and we suggest also have precast, let's say, have filigree slabs.
Yeah.
We produce the reinforcement drawings as well, but only for the upper 2 layers. The drawings for the filigree slab itself and the different
they come from the construction.
They come from the construction contractor. So So you're not going to have it on one hand the whole time.
No, well, I'm talking just about the proofing, not the preparation of the documents.
Just
the documents come from the contractor, but our goal is they all go to the same proofing engineer under the same contract.
All right.
Ideally, we don't want to tell the construction contractor, you need to hire this proofing engineer to come to the site and check your work.
But that's not possible, is it? Because once the check-in engineer gets one project, by law, he needs to stick to that project until the finish.
That's the legal provision, but not the contractual provision.
Right.
So so we try to avoid that.
I suspect it's leading up to something.
Our goal is the A&E is Yeah,
No. Just,
so that's where we're trying to get. Okay, next slide, please. This is a scope of work from that construction phase engineering support service option. So let's see. So that's where we want to have the proofing engineer under the A&E go out, as you mentioned before, to the site, to the inspections, and also check all the documents that come from contractor, like structural steel shop drawings, prefab element drawings. Roofing is typically something that comes from the construction contractor. And next slide, please. This is then the text which we put in a scope of work for outside Germany. Just this, it's little less, it's nothing during construction, but we just, so this is not a host nation code requirement, but we try to get the same QA package as we get in Germany.
are you getting? Can you, from your experience, seeing the level of quality you're looking for in outside of Germany?
I think I have it somewhere as challenge.
Okay.
I hope I have it.
Yeah, we're on the next slide. So.
We sort of had it. Oh yeah, it's coming later. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to talk about that because it is a challenge. Yeah. So these are like the expectations and challenges again. The consideration of structural proofing if the construction phase option is not awarded is definitely a challenge for us. So we try to get that awarded. The fee structure, as you mentioned before, is kind of interesting because it is based on fixed fees as a certain percentage on a theoretical construction cost. However, modifications are reimbursed based on number of pages of the modification, which, so our experience is, our approach is always the base structural calculation, so there should always have as many pages as possible. The modification should always have as less pages as possible because the fee is established by the percentage of pages per modification divided over the original pages. Correct. Yeah. So that's like a challenge because at the beginning you don't know what the cost is, and then the travel cost is reimbursed based on actual cost, like mileage. And what we also find is, as you mentioned before, that every state is different. The fee structure in every state is different. What project requires structural proofing is different. Who hires a proofing engineer, who pays them, and who establishes the fee is different when you go from state to state. Next slide, please. I don't know if you have that. We have those two attachments as optional to look at. I don't know if we have the time just to give people an idea of, or maybe we can do it at the end.
We have a little bit of time. Yeah, if you'd like. Yeah.
Can you pull up the PDF?
Yeah, they're like, so we have two PDFs which we created to understand what requires structural proofing. And so this is first PDF, and I don't think we need to go into details, but just to give people an idea, like on the left-hand column, you see the states, Rheinland-Pfalz, Hessen, Bavaria, and in the rows you have we have different requirements, like who pays a proofing engineer, who determines the proofing fee, who hires a proofing engineer. And if you look at all the hyperlinks and all the regulations there, you will see that it's like a mess, like every state does things differently. So when you go from Rheinland-Pfalz to Hessen, everything changes and you need to start looking at it. It's different code, different paragraphs, different regulations. Sometimes the state hires a proofing engineer, sometimes the customer can hire the proofing engineer, and it's all different.
Sometimes you get lists where you can put the preferences and yeah.
And if you could open the other PDF, and that is also, I think, a little mind blowing. This is like just extract out of the state building code, what projects do require proofing, and this page is Rheinland-Pfalz, and if you like this, these projects require proofing, and if you scroll down the slide, then you will get to the other states, and in every state that language changes. The content is kind of the same, but the way it's described is different in every state. Like in some states, it's described as the following projects do require structural proofing. In the next state, it says the following projects do not require it. So you always need to be careful how you read it, so to understand what projects actually require it.
And just to let everybody know, these documents will be made available to everybody who attended that.
And these two PDFs, we sent it to you. It's a draft which we
Yes.
put together.
Is that okay?
It might be, it's okay, but
At your own risk.
I don't guarantee that it's all,
helpful,
that it's all.
No guarantees.
That's all. Okay. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry.
A funny thing that you say with different regulations. Because I just figured out that in Rheinland-Pfalz, in some buildings, I cannot do my stamp on it. Because I didn't get it before 2009.
Oops. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's outside Germany, as you asked before. Yes, they are. We've just started that. It is challenging. Like the familiarity with the process of engineers outside to understand what we actually want. This is what we want. We don't just want a letter like, yeah, I checked it, it's all good. We want to get the same result we get here. So we need to teach people what our expectation is, which is challenging. And I think we need to come up with a document to actually describe what our expectation is, because this paragraph in the scope of work is very generic. And I think we need to come up with an attachment like this is what we want to see. Also, of course, we look for an A&E that is familiar with local laws and regulations in the state that is we have a contract in, and then also tracking those reports on our side. We need to make sure we track those reports as good as we track them on projects in Germany. Like on a project in Germany, we will always ask you, where's your proofing report? Outside Germany, because it's not required for permitting, sometimes it gets lost. Okay. And next slide, please. This is just an outlook. So our goal is for the future, we are considering to develop an IDIQ contract to partner with the German proofing engineer office under our contract. So then we would not have them in the scope of work anymore. We would our task orders per project for the projects, and we would coordinate between the A&E and the proofing engineer during design and during construction. That is still out there. We're working that scope. It takes time. We need to find the appropriate office to do that for us, because we need to have an office that can support all the different states. And not every proofing engineer is licensed in every state, so that office would probably need to have sub offices. It's like a big goal. We're not there, but we think maybe in 12 or 18 months or so, we will probably get there. I think that's my last slide. Yes.
So last slide. So I guess the first question, just to kick the Q&A session off, is really listening to what we just shared and discussed is, do you think we're aligned and are we on the right path of providing the services, and not just the legal, but the quality type of services that are necessary? So yeah, I don't know if we have online questions as well, if there's any opportunities.
But we
here.
could maybe, Akim, maybe to answer Brian's question, any thoughts on that? Are industry and government aligned on expectations of proofing engineers?
Yeah, I think on proofing engineers, yes. I mean, I cannot speak like for all projects and all A&Es. I think there are differences. I think we're getting very close to what we expect and what we get. I think we had challenges on what is part of we still have challenges. What is actually part of that final package? which is not what I mentioned before, like the Weber drawings a German contractor would expect, which is not what a US would provide. And we have those challenges to make sure we get this level of detail on drawings in a final package. We try to put it in our scope of work. We're citing DINs, we're citing regulations, which say this is how a package should look like. That's where we still work on. We get different results from industry on level of detail of drawings.
Right.
It's not only structural, it's across the disciplines, electrical, mechanical. We get drawings which probably meet 100% in the US, but a German contractor would say, oh, wait a minute, that's details missing.
Right.
I think structural proofing, I would say yes, we get what we need.
You have a question?
You described some of the challenges when we're outside of Europe. So what's an example of that? Like, how do you coordinate with the host nation if they have their own stuff? For example, if we build something in Bulgaria or Romania, they want also their own independent firm doing all the checks. So how do you reconcile that? Or what's an example?
To be honest, I have not seen outside Germany a similar system as the mandatory state building code independent proofing engineer. I think that's unique, that you really have a mandatory checking as detailed as we have it here. That's where we're trying to establish this on our own contract. That's why we try to get this from an engineer office to get like a similar quality as we get here. I know, Michael, are you aware of any outside?
I know that like in Belgium, for example, there's something similar, but it's different. It's like if you get your structural calculations put by a licensed roofing engineer, your insurance is lower. You get a reduction in the insurance, but that's not a requirement. You can do this, and then you pay less for your insurance. That's what Belgium has to think of. You touch the same. Where I have never had the experience. I know that in Poland they have also proofing engineers, but I don't think that it's the like a legal requirement as it is here. I have never had that experience.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of repeat what you just said, Michael, for the online guests, that to your knowledge, for example, in Belgium, you know that there is a proofing engineer concept, but it's more situated for engineers to reduce their insurance fees, liability really, but not a structured program like we've discussed in Germany. But also in Poland, there is a proofing engineer concept or not?
There is a concept based on the amount of the volume, building volume, and the amount of costs.
Okay.
They do check that.
But is that mandatory? Is it
From a certain cost, yes.
okay?
Okay. So it seems that, Scott, you have a question? No, I was just going to say, it seems that Germany's sort of like the leader on this type of structured process. The Corps has a quality control and checking need elsewhere. And so I'd be interested too to see how we can improve that as well as an industry partner to build those concepts. Scott.
So the requirement of the engineers I was a bit familiar with, but the details are all new to me. So my questions would be a bit basic. So I saw you have the PDF, which we can look at and see what all the specific requirements are for what requires the engineer. But for those that it's new to us, can you give us any rules of thumb that might exist, or what kind of projects would require? Is it a certain occupancy or number of type?
Yeah, I think you had that before.
Yeah.
It's like building. It's the building class. You have like how many? 5 different
You
buildings.
have five, actually 6. You have 1 through 5, 1 being a little house in the prairie, 5 being a nuclear plant. So from building category 1 to building category 3, in general, in Germany, you don't need a check-in engineer if you are a PE, a professional engineer, or what we would call a professional engineer in the US.
The PDF again, projects that require structured proofing. We can take a look.
Sure.
That's all right. So
So-
it sounds like
It's actually a very simple concept. But and again, I come back to Achim, depending on the state,
Yeah.
And that kind of like that middle building category.
Nuances, right?
Exactly. So for example, and that's what I was mentioning before, in Bavaria, I'm allowed because I'm a PE professional engineer here.
Yeah.
In Germany, licensed, I have my stamp, I can sign everything that goes up to Gebäudeklasse 3, so building class 3.
Yeah.
But in Rheinland-Pfalz, I'm not because I didn't get my stamp before 2009. So you start getting those kind of situations, and everything that is further than Gebäudeklasse 3, you need to send to the checking engineer. It's by law.
And is it mostly just statics and overall checking, or do they also check some user specific requirements? For example, if there was a last load requirement for the building, is that something that the engineers also don't check?
Depends on the building category again.
Yeah, but from our ATFP requirements, for example, or US seismic requirements, we always say this is not part of the proofing process.
Okay.
Because for us, we don't want to pay for it.
Yeah.
And then also, as you can imagine, the German proofing engineer would not understand our performance requirements. Like we had projects in the past. I think the Garmisch Army Lodge is an example where we had a proofing engineer that was actually checking it, but then they check it for like no crack in the wall. And you know what we say, it can crack, it can, you know, so we do it ourselves.
Okay.
And what we normally say is the US specific package should be part of a structural design in a separate chapter that is not subject to structural proofing, so that the proofing engineer knows about it.
Yeah.
So that they are not surprised about what the hell, why do we have all this rebar here? But they are not responsible to verify.
Okay, understand. Thank you.
Right.
So I'm a structural engineer by trade, by training. But for those who aren't, for example, I brought our team chief with us for environmental. Do you have any direct, words?
I don't know what rebar is.
So do you have any words, wisdom for him, or how should he be concerned, with this from an environmental standpoint?
You should.
That's actually a good one.
There are very structures. Proofing, or is that just used today, or is there other?
Not exactly. The check-in engineer does not only check structural elementation. They do, that's their main task, that's their main force, but they also check, for example, compliance towards fire safety and environmental. They do not check serviceability. They do check ultimate limit state, so kind of like collapse, whatever. But they do put a lot of effort into the environmental aspects, crack control. If we have, for example, let's say a basin for a diesel tank, if we actually comply with the crack width according to norm, they also check if, let's say, the thermal insulation below the foundation raft is actually strong enough, or it will deflect. They also check water tightness of the let's say of the walls, or the foundation slab. If we're building a basement in groundwater, they do that. So that indirectly involves environmental as well.
So they're not checking. So if they're building a wastewater treatment plant, they're not checking the oxygen demand for the water.
No, of course not.
Treatment process.
No. No.
It sounds like you need a special engineer for you, huh?
That should be my job. Hopefully that's done with that stage.
And regarding fire protection, so the proofing engineer checks like the structural fire protection.
Correct.
Like the concrete cover, for example,
or the special boarding for a steel construction, for example.
But not like fire protection as we understand it from
No,
our perspective.
no. So
like egress, for example.
pretty much they just correct it, or they just check it in accordance to a fire protection concept.
We could actually have a whole event just on fire protection.
Yes.
Yeah. More than one, yes.
Because of the specificity of these requirements, do they get paid more than like a run-of-the-mill structural engineer?
Didn't sound like it. I mean, you talk about 150 euros an hour. It's more than your average engineer,
Yes.
but it's about equivalent to to a project manager on, what the US government typically pays for a project manager or a senior engineer. But certainly it is a senior level engineer position for the most
I
part.
would say proofing fee is a good income.
Yeah, a good income.
That's very diplomatically said.
I mean, typically the proofing engineer has an office and they hire junior engineers from universities to do the actual
Correct.
The slave work. Yeah.
So do we have possibly any online questions?
Nope, no online questions.
I have another one.
Oh,
Are there any typical findings that maybe really common?
common finding.
Do
Do you want to take this one or should I? Typical,
Can they hear online?
What?
Can they hear the questions online?
Yes.
typical green marks are mainly in the reinforcement drawings, where they do not agree with an overlap of 2 bars, for example.
Okay.
That's a typical one where they go like, we calculate and we go according to norm or according to Eurocode or American standards. We go like, the overlap is going to be 30 centimeters. He goes like, no, you need 32.5. You pretty much do it. So you just take it over. But those are the most common ones. You're welcome.
So maybe if I could just kind of wrap up a little bit. I think some good lessons learned, just drawing out some of the discussion today, would be one lifetime proofing engineer per project from beginning to the end. Also making sure you get the right one, right? Not a wood proofing for a glass structure or concrete structure. Also pricing information, really important for the AE and also good for the government to hear how that's priced, base versus modification. Get as many pages in the base, less in the modification, because that will drive some of the pricing discussions later on, as well as hopefully by presenting the scope of work, providing a little bit of context for why it's written the way it is written, because that's not self-evident to everybody who would just pick up a scope of work and look at it. So very good discussion. And I will maybe hand it back to Scott to wrap up the meeting.
Yeah. Well, thanks for everyone for your time in person, your contributions, and those who joined online. But mostly, thank you, Brian. Thanks, Pat. This is just a coin from our SAME post.
Thank you very much.
And
He got a coin.
yeah, you already got the biggest spend. So with that, we'll wrap up. We're not going to have a meeting for a couple months now. So next time, quite a few of us will be together at the JETSI in May in Texas next month, and then we'll see each other at the golf tournament to June. So start practicing.
That's right. Very good. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody online. Have a good rest of the day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.